I don't care about the bet.
Zach Morris doesn't care about a bet? The world's going goofy!
Before Bayside High ever aired, its cast was nearly someone else entirely. Future TV icons were quietly fired from the pilot. The lead's blonde hair was completely fake. A drug episode originally featured hard narcotics. And the character names were stolen from real people, including a notorious criminal's son. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Saved by the Bell. Fact 1, the show that almost never existed.
Karen, what are you doing here?
I go to school here. My dad was just transferred. You two know each other?
Most people who grew up watching Saved by the Bell have no idea the show they loved was actually a rescue job, a second attempt at a series that had already failed once before reaching them. The whole story starts in 1986, when Brandon Tartikoff, then the president of NBC, pulled producer Peter Engel into his office and told him about a teacher he'd had in the 6th grade, a woman named Miss Bliss, who had made a real difference in his life. Tartikoff said he'd always wanted to make a show about someone like her, and he handed Engel the assignment. Engel wasn't enthusiastic about the idea, but was under contract and didn't have much choice. He brought in writer Sam Bobrick, and they put together a pilot that aired on NBC in the summer of 1987. It drew a decent rating, but NBC still decided not to pick it up for a full series. Tartikoff wasn't ready to walk away from it, though. He made a deal with the Disney Channel to air 13 episodes of a retooled version of the show called Good Morning, Miss Bliss, centered on a junior high teacher played by British actress Hayley Mills. The show aired in primetime on Disney Channel from late 1988 into 1989, and it featured early versions of several characters who would later become household names, including a young schemer named Zach Morris, played by 14-year-old Mark Paul Gosselaar. But the show never found its audience. By the time the last episode aired, Disney had already decided not to order more. It looked like the whole thing was finished. That's when Tartikoff made one more push, taking the show back to NBC and suggesting a complete overhaul. The teacher would be dropped, the students would move from Indianapolis, Indiana, to a fictional high school in California, and 3 new characters would be added to the cast. NBC agreed, and Saved by the Bell premiered on August 20th, 1989. One failed show, 2 separate networks, and a complete reinvention later, one of the most beloved Saturday morning programs in television history was finally born. Fact 2, Urkel and David Silver were almost in it.
You're right, it won't happen again.
Just give me a chance, please.
See you around.
Before Saved by the Bell became the show millions of people remember, it went through a version that barely anyone has seen. And that very early version featured 2 young actors who would go on to become some of the most recognizable faces of 1990s television. The original pilot for Good Morning, Miss Bliss aired on NBC on July 11, 1987, more than 2 years before Saved by the Bell ever debuted. The pilot took place at a grade school, not a junior high, and it had an entirely different student cast from what audiences would eventually come to know. The only actor who carried over from that pilot into the eventual series was Hayley Mills, who played the title character. Among the students featured in that discarded pilot was a young actor named Brian Austin Green, credited at the time simply as Brian Green. He played a serious, academically focused student named Adam Moncrief and was, in many ways, the lead student character in the episode, wearing business suits to class and driving much of the story. A few years later, Green would land a far more prominent role as David Silver on Beverly Hills, 9210, a role that would define much of his early career. Also in the pilot was a young Jaleel White, who played a character named Bobby Wilson. White was, at that point, still a few years away from landing the role that would make him famous, Steve Urkel on Family Matters. But his appearance in this forgotten pilot puts him in the same story as Saved by the Bell, years before either show became a hit. Jonathan Brandis, who would later star in Sequest DSV, also appeared in that original pilot. When NBC passed on the show and the Disney Channel version was developed, every single one of those student actors was replaced and the entire cast was rebuilt from scratch. Green, White, and Brandis each went on to find success elsewhere, never knowing they had come within a single pilot of being part of one of the most iconic teen shows ever made. Fact 3. Zach Morris was named after a criminal's son.
I'm your man.
Likewise, Zach.
I'm glad you said that.
Said what?
Homework.
I didn't say.
The character of Zach Morris is one of the most recognizable in television history, the charming, scheming, utterly lovable troublemaker at the center of Saved by the Bell. But the name Zach didn't come from a writer's room brainstorming session. It came from a very specific person in executive producer Peter Engel's personal life, and the backstory behind that choice is genuinely strange. According to Engel, he named several characters on the show after real people he knew. The character of Screech was named after a producer he had worked with named Screech Washington, whom he declined to actually hire, but felt free to borrow from. The character of Slater was named after a child who attended kindergarten with one of Engel's sons. The character of Mr. Belding was named after a former editor of Engel's who worked at Universal and was, by Engel's description, rather cranky. And Zach? Engel has said directly that Zach Morris was named after the son of his close friend John DeLorean. The same John DeLorean who was the flamboyant founder of the DeLorean Motor Company, the car company best known for making the stainless steel sports car featured in Back to the Future, and who was arrested in 1982 in a federal drug sting, caught on camera in a hotel room as part of a cocaine trafficking operation. DeLorean was ultimately acquitted on grounds of entrapment, but his arrest had been international news. His son's name was Zachary. Engel took that name and gave it to the most popular character in his hit show, essentially honoring his friendship with a man who had become famous for all the wrong reasons. The character himself, of course, had no connection to any of that, but the name on his jacket traces directly back to one of the stranger celebrity scandals of the 1980s. Fact 4. Gosselar's blonde hair was never real.
Screech, I should be bottled?
That letter was good.
Absolutely. Her soul set ablaze by the words of her.
For an entire generation of viewers, Zach Morris and his perfectly styled blonde hair were inseparable. It was part of the character's whole image, the effortless California cool, the guy who always looked like he belonged on a surfboard even when he was sitting in detention. But Mark Paul Gosselar's natural hair color is brown, and what viewers were seeing on screen every week was the result of a chemical process he had to keep up for years. Gosselar has talked about this publicly on multiple occasions, and his reaction is always a version of mild disbelief that anyone thought it looked natural in the first place. During an appearance on the daytime talk show, Live with Kelly and Michael, he put it plainly. People go, "Wow, you're not blonde anymore. When was I ever blonde? That's not real?" The reason it started is actually connected to a completely unrelated chapter of Gosselar's teenage life. Just before he auditioned for the show, he had been attending a camp associated with a Marine military academy. He had aspirations of becoming a Marine officer, and when he came back, his head had been shaved. As his hair grew back in, his mother added blonde highlights. He went to his audition for Zach Morris looking the way he looked, and the producers loved it. They asked him to keep the look, and that meant dyeing his hair for the entire run of the show. Gosselar later described the process as putting toxins on his hair for roughly 6 years, including the original series, the spin-off The College Years, and the television movie that followed. He has said that he's genuinely surprised he still has hair at all after that many years of chemical treatments. He wore blue contact lenses over his naturally brown eyes throughout much of the show as well, adding another layer of artifice to the character's all-American look. Fact 5. He also wore blue contacts until he couldn't.
Girl wasn't even that cute. I'll be charitable. She was a 3.
I wouldn't knock you on the floor for a 3.
The blonde hair wasn't the only part of Zach Morris's look that Mark Paul Gosselaar had to manufacture. The blue eyes that completed the character's appearance were just as fake, and they came with a price. For much of Saved by the Bell's run, Gosselaar wore blue-tinted contact lenses to give Zach a look that matched the character's golden boy image. Combined with the bleached hair, the contacts helped complete the all-American California teenager aesthetic that producers had envisioned. Gosselaar's real eye color is brown, which matched neither the image they were going for nor, as it happened, his heavily dyed hair. The contacts worked well enough as a cosmetic choice, but eventually his eyes stopped cooperating. Gosselaar developed an allergic reaction to the lenses over time, and continuing to wear them stopped being a viable option. When that happened, the producers made the practical decision to let him stop. And from that point on, Zach Morris's eye color quietly shifted from episode to episode, depending on whether Gosselaar happened to be wearing the contacts on any given day of filming. It's the kind of continuity detail that most viewers would never consciously notice, especially in an era before streaming made it easy to watch every episode in rapid succession. But it means that the character of Zach Morris didn't have consistent eye color throughout the series, and that the blue-eyed version of the character many people remember is, in a very real sense, a partial illusion. Between the dyed hair and the contacts that he could only sometimes wear, Gosselaar was essentially constructing a cosmetic identity for the character that required constant upkeep, and that occasionally fell apart when his own body refused to go along with it. Fact 6. Jesse's drug episode was originally about speed.
Other way. Boring.
Forget it, Zach. I'm not gonna let you mess up this project.
Of all the episodes in Saved by the Bell's 4-season run, the one that people still talk about most is an episode from the second season called Jesse's Song. It's the episode where overachiever Jessie Spano, played by Elizabeth Berkley, becomes addicted to caffeine pills while trying to balance her studies with her new singing group. The episode culminates in one of the most memorably overwrought moments in Saturday morning television history, with Jessie breaking down while trying to sing an 80s pop song and dissolving into tears in Zach's arms. For years, audiences found the scene oddly intense for what it actually depicted: a girl who had too much coffee. The reason for that gap between the reaction and the substance, it turns out, is because the whole episode was originally written about something else entirely. Executive producer Peter Engel revealed in his memoir that when he and writer Tom Tenowich originally developed the episode, Jessie wasn't supposed to be hooked on caffeine pills at all. She was supposed to be hooked on speed, actual amphetamines. Engel had wanted to use the storyline to tackle both drug use and the pressure teenagers put on themselves to perform and succeed academically. He believed the subject was serious enough to deserve serious treatment. NBC's Standards and Practices Department disagreed. They told Engel that speed was too heavy a subject for a Saturday morning show aimed at children and teenagers, and they refused to let the episode air in that form. Engel pushed back, but ultimately couldn't win the argument. The compromise was caffeine pills. And critically, as Engel noted, nothing else about the episode was changed. The script stayed essentially the same. Jessie still acted like someone in the grip of a genuinely dangerous addiction. And Engel, for his part, was openly frustrated with the result. He later wrote that the average caffeine pill was roughly equivalent to a cup of coffee, and that they might as well have had Jessie addicted to tea. Fact 7. Slater was supposed to be Italian.
You heard me. Get out of my face. And what if I don't, punk? Then I'll just have to make you, punk.
The character of A.C. Slater is so closely associated with Mario Lopez that it's almost impossible to imagine anyone else in the role. But the character who eventually became the lovable jock from a military family was originally written for someone who looked and sounded nothing like Lopez. And the casting process that led to him getting the part was genuinely last minute. When executive producer Peter Engel was developing the character for the transition from Good Morning Miss Bliss to Saved by the Bell, he envisioned Slater as a very specific type, a young Italian-American street kid, an army brat, someone with a leather jacket and a bit of an edge. The reference point Engel described was a young John Travolta type, cocky, physical, with that kind of working-class swagger. The character was written with that image in mind, and the casting process began with that profile as the target. The problem was that no one quite fit. Engel and his team auditioned actors with the Italian-American angle in mind and couldn't find the right person. After enough time had passed without a successful casting, Engel made the decision to open the character up to actors of other ethnicities, essentially starting the search over. 2 days after that decision was made, Mario Lopez walked in. Lopez was a dancer and drummer who had appeared on the children's show Kids Incorporated, and he was of Latino descent. He read for the part, the producers thought he was the best actor they'd seen for the role, and he was cast. The character's background was adjusted accordingly. Slater remained an army brat. His father was written as a military man, and his ethnicity was updated to reflect the actor playing him. It took less than 48 hours from opening the role to finding the person who would define it for years. Fact 8. Jenny Garth almost played Kelly.
You were buying concert tickets.
That's right! You weren't there either. You know how Leg got the mumps?
The role of Kelly Kapowski, the all-American girl next door at the center of Saved by the Bell's romantic storylines, is one of the most iconic parts in Saturday morning television history. Tiffany Amber Thiessen played the character so convincingly that it's easy to assume the casting was obvious. It wasn't. The role came down to 3 actresses, and one of the finalists went on to become famous on a completely different show that competed directly with Saved by the Bell for the same audience. When producer Peter Engel was narrowing down the field for Kelly Kapowski, he got to the final 3: Thiessen, Elizabeth Berkley, and an actress named Jenny Garth. All 3 were considered seriously for the part. Engel had actually met Thiessen a year earlier while casting Good Morning, Miss Bliss, and had been impressed enough to stay interested. By the time she came back around for Saved by the Bell, he felt her acting had improved significantly and believed she had exactly the right wholesome, approachable appeal the role required. Others on the production leaned toward Berkley, who was considered the most technically accomplished actress of the 3. After a read-through with Mario Lopez, who had just been cast as Slater, Engel made the case for Thiessen and won. Garth, the 3rd finalist, didn't stay out of work for long. Just a short time later, she landed a prominent role on Beverly Hills, 9210, the same show where Thiessen's future Saved by the Bell co-star Brian Austin Green would also appear. Garth and Thiessen effectively swapped trajectories. Garth got the Aaron Spelling Show, Thiessen got Bayside High, and both ended up with defining roles that followed them for decades. Fact 9. Lisa Turtle was originally a Jewish girl from Long Island.
I'm really grateful for everything you tried to do. But I've got to stand on my own 2 feet now.
Lark Voorhies' portrayal of Lisa Turtle, the fashion-obsessed, quick-witted, effortlessly stylish member of the Bayside High gang, is so natural that it's hard to believe the character was ever written to be anyone other than her. But when the role was first conceived, it was designed for a completely different type of person, and Voorhies essentially forced a rewrite just by walking into the room. In the original conception, Lisa Turtle was written as a wealthy Jewish princess from Long Island, spoiled, materialistic, and obsessed with shopping. The core personality traits were already there, but the character's background and identity were drawn from a very specific cultural archetype. Executive producer Peter Engel later noted that the name Lisa Turtle itself came from a real person he knew, so the character had already been shaped around an existing reference point. Then Lark Voorhies came into audition. Engel has described the moment as immediate. He knew the moment she walked into his office that she was the right person for the role. She was 14 at the time and had appeared on the show Small Wonder. The performance in the audition was strong enough that Engel made the call on the spot, even though it meant rewriting the character from the ground up. When some members of the casting team pushed back, pointing out that the character as written wasn't black, Engel reportedly responded with a simple declaration, "Well, she is now." The rewrite changed the character's background completely, giving Lisa a family of physicians and moving her from Long Island to the fictional Palisades area of Los Angeles. The shopping obsession stayed. The personality stayed. What changed was everything else, all because one actress made an impression that a producer couldn't ignore. Fact 10. Zach and Slater were written as rivals, not friends.
And that's where these love letters come into play?
Where'd you get those?
The friendship between Zach Morris and A.C. Slater is one of the central relationships in Saved by the Bell. Two very different guys who somehow clicked, balancing each other out and anchoring the group. But in the original concept for the show, the two characters weren't supposed to be friends at all. They were written as rivals, and a fairly intense ones at that. When the scripts were first developed for the Saved by the Bell reboot, Slater was conceived specifically as a threat to Zach. The idea was that Slater would arrive at Bayside as a transfer student and immediately begin competing with Zach for the attention of Kelly Kapowski. The two of them would be in direct ongoing conflict, jostling for social dominance and romantic priority throughout the series. That kind of friction was meant to drive storylines and create tension within the group. What changed the plan was something that can't be scripted. When Mark Paul Gosselaar and Mario Lopez began reading scenes together, the chemistry between them was obvious to everyone watching. There was an ease and a natural playfulness in how they played off each other that made the rivalry feel forced by comparison. The writers and producers recognized what they were looking at and made a call. The rivalry was too good to waste on conflict, and the two characters would work better as friends. The antagonism didn't disappear entirely. The early episodes of the show do feature some friction between Zach and Slater before they settle into their friendship. But the original plan to keep them as genuine long-term rivals was dropped in favor of what turned out to be one of the more convincing male friendships in Saturday morning television. Two real actors with genuine chemistry between them accidentally rewrote the show's central dynamic before filming was even complete. Fact 11. Dustin Diamond was hired by mistake.
Deal was your paper for a date with Lisa. Wait! That is not fair.
Dustin Diamond was the youngest member of the Saved by the Bell, cast by a significant margin, and the reason for that age gap is one of the stranger stories behind the scenes of the show. Executive producer Peter Engel has admitted that he hired Diamond without fully understanding how young the boy actually was, and that by the time he realized his mistake, it was too late to easily undo it. Diamond was born in January of 1977. When he was cast for Good Morning, Miss Bliss, and subsequently kept on for Saved by the Bell, he was 11 years old. His co-star Mark Paul Gosselaar was 14 at the time, and most of the rest of the cast fell in a similar range of teenage years. Diamond was 3 years younger than that, still solidly in grade school, when everyone else was already navigating early high school. Engel has said that he misread Diamond's headshot during the casting process and didn't catch how young the boy was until it was already done. By that point, Diamond had been read opposite Gosselaar, who was the one who actually pushed for his casting. Gosselaar had said during the audition process that Diamond simply was Screech, that the character and the actor were essentially the same person, and that no one else could play it. Engel liked Diamond's comedic timing and his chemistry with the other kids, and the bond between the cast members had already begun to form. He ultimately kept him in the role, which meant dealing with the practical reality that Diamond had to adhere to child labor laws that didn't apply to the older cast members. Engel later reflected on how this age gap shaped Diamond's experience on the show, noting that 11 and 12-year-olds simply don't socialize the same way 15 and 16-year-olds do, and that the gap made it genuinely harder for Diamond to feel like part of the group when the cameras weren't rolling. Fact 12. The theme song composer also worked on Golden Girls.
Did you say Wednesday? Well, that's the one day the license isn't good.
The Saved by the Bell theme song is one of the most immediately recognizable pieces of music in Saturday morning television history. The moment those opening notes start, something happens to anyone who grew up in the early 90s. It's an almost Pavlovian response decades later. But the story of how that song came to exist involves a direct challenge to the producer who ran the show, and the man who wrote it had a connection to a very different kind of hit television. The theme was composed by Scott Gale, who also served as music coordinator on the Golden Girls for 7 years during that show's run, in addition to earlier work on the NBC sitcom Benson. So the same person who helped shape the musical identity of a show about 4 older women living in Miami was also responsible for the sound that defined Saturday mornings for an entirely different generation. What makes the Saved by the Bell theme's origin particularly interesting is that Gale technically wasn't supposed to write what he wrote. Peter Engel had lost a battle over the show's title. He hadn't wanted to call it Saved by the Bell in the first place, and having lost that fight, he was determined at minimum to keep the phrase out of the theme song. He gave explicit instructions to all 5 composers competing for the job that he would reject any song that included the title in the lyrics. Gale was the only one who ignored him. 4 of the 5 submissions followed Engel's instructions, and Engel found all 4 flat and forgettable. Then Gale played his version, the one with the phrase right there in the chorus, and Engel knew immediately it was the best of the group. He picked it anyway, acknowledged later that he was glad Gale had broken the rules, and gave Saturday mornings one of its most enduring theme songs. Fact 13, the entire cast thought they'd be canceled every year.
Oh, like it was funny wrecking my study date the night before?
Hey, you started it, man, making me look like a jerk at the mat.
One of the stranger footnotes in the visual history of Saved by the Bell is the fact that Zach Morris's hair seemed to change dramatically from season to season. His style shifted, the cut varied, the length and shape rarely stayed the same. For years, this was mostly treated as a product of the times, a reflection of how quickly 90s hair trends moved. But Mark Paul Gosselaar has explained that the real reason was considerably more specific, and it says something honest about how little anyone on the show expected it to survive. Gosselaar has described the cast's relationship with renewal as one of perpetual uncertainty. After each season wrapped, the working assumption among the actors was that they were done, that the show had run its course and wouldn't be coming back. Everyone said their goodbyes at the end of filming as though they genuinely believed it was the last time they'd all be on that set together. When the show got renewed and they came back, Gosselaar had simply moved on with his hair and his look the way any teenager would in the months between school years. He wasn't maintaining any kind of deliberate continuity because no one thought continuity would matter. He said with some bemusement that fans occasionally pointed out to him how dramatically his hair changed from one season to the next, and that his response was essentially, from season to season, "I thought I was done." The hairstyle inconsistencies that viewers noticed over the years weren't a creative choice or a product of deliberate styling decisions. They were the accidental record of a cast that never quite believed the show would last as long as it did. Fact 14. A no-swearing rule existed on and off camera.
Glad you're here. Is Slater coming too?
Slater who?
The guy that gave you that fat lip.
The tone of Saved by the Bell was, by design, almost aggressively clean. It was a Saturday morning show aimed at children and teenagers, and the content reflected that. But the no-swearing policy on set went considerably further than the scripts. It extended off camera as well, a personal rule maintained by executive producer Peter Engel that applied to the entire production environment. Engel established early on that swearing was simply not going to happen on his set, and that this rule applied not just to what was filmed, but to the atmosphere backstage and in the halls between takes. He was working primarily with teenagers and saw himself as having something of a parental responsibility for the tone of the environment they were spending their days in. The Rule was part of a broader effort to keep the set what he later described as feeling like a family, a place that operated with a certain standard of conduct. Whether the rule was perfectly observed is another matter. Gosselar has said publicly that he personally broke it on more than a few occasions, which isn't surprising given that the cast were teenagers going through all the typical pressures and dramas of adolescence while also managing the unusual demands of early fame. The show attracted enormous attention during its peak years, and the cast were dealing with the pressures of public celebrity, real romantic relationships with each other, and the general chaos of being teenagers. All of which created plenty of moments where a rule against swearing was not the first thing on anyone's mind. Still, the fact that the rule existed and was taken seriously enough to be discussed by multiple people involved in the production says something about the particular culture Engel was trying to build around the show. For all the behind-the-scenes complexity, the set was genuinely intended to function as a protective environment for the young people making it. Fact 15. Gosselar dated all three. Female co-stars.
8th grade, aren't you?
What makes you think that?
Give me a break. You must think I'm an idiot.
No, well,
The romantic life of the Saved by the Bell, cast off camera, turned out to be considerably more complicated than anything the show's writers put on screen, and much of that complexity ran directly through its lead actor. In a 2009 interview with People magazine, Mark Paul Gosselar confirmed what had been rumored for years, that during the production of the show, he had dated all three of his female co-stars at different points: Lark Voorhees, Tiffany Thiessen, and Elizabeth Berkley. Each relationship was separate and took place at different times during the show's run. Gosselar and Voorhees, who played Lisa Turtle, dated for roughly 3 years, from around the time the show premiered in 1989 through the early 90s, making it the longest of the three relationships. Gosselar also dated Thiessen, who played Kelly Kapowski, and Berkley, who played Jesse Spano, at different points during production. The practical consequences of these overlapping relationships were significant for the people involved and for the show itself. When relationships ended, the cast still had to show up to the same set, read lines with each other, and in some cases, portray romantic connections on screen. Peter Engel, who described himself as something of a surrogate parent figure to the cast, was aware of all of it. He has acknowledged that the situation created real tension at points, that there were periods when cast members weren't speaking to each other off camera, which required intervention before those dynamics started affecting what ended up on film. Gosselar himself has described the whole situation simply and without much drama. When people asked him about it, he said, referring to the cast collectively, "All of us dated at one point or another. It was incestuous." It was an honest acknowledgement of what happens when a group of teenagers spend years working in close proximity to each other, becoming famous together, and growing up in full view of each other.